Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Berlin Noir. And today, as you can see, we are a ways away from most of what we have built so far in the city, and that is because we are finally beginning work on the Charlottenburg Palace. So the palace is, of course, located in Charlottenburg, and here's a reference of what we're building. On the left is the aerial view from back then, and a little hard to make out exactly what is what, which is why I included the image there on the right, which shows a modern version of the palace garden and much more easy to see the paths and stuff. And I included that for that fact, but also because I referenced that a lot. I didn't really use the old aerial view from back then since, yeah, you can't really see the paths. It's hard to really make out anything besides seeing the palace, and even that's kind of hard to make out at times with shadows and such, with everything in black and white. So considering how, I would say not too much has changed from 1929 to modern day with the palace, with the exception of the palace garden and some of the paths being slightly different, and most noticeably the central part of the garden. Today you have a nice floral display, and it looks really nice. And back then you had a more simple, kind of just open green area in the center, which I was, for historical accuracy, of course I considered that, but I kind of wanted to go more with a little more fancier appearance, making it stand out, since this is, of course, a very nice location today, and of course back then as well. So I went more with the layout of modern day with some of the paths, since I could easily reference that with the maps and such that do exist today of the palace garden. So I, however, will not, or I should say I'm not planning on making those really fancy floral displays that the palace garden has today. So while I'm going to have some of the slightly cooler, I would say, paths, the layout there, as you can see, I won't make it exactly a copy of it is today, since of course I don't want it to look as though it is modern, so I did want to avoid that. But as you could see from the thumbnail, if you saw that not too much seems to have been completed as far as detailing, basically no detailing whatsoever. And that's because this build is going to be a two-part build. I had no idea and did not expect it whatsoever for this to be such a large project, because I do believe I scaled this area up fairly significantly, since I have been doing that throughout the city, since of course, I'm not doing this to scale whatsoever. So I'm just scaling some areas up that are, maybe more important or kind of cooler, that I want to make a little larger, a little more grand, while other areas that are maybe more simple, just, average Berlin corner of the city, whatever you want to call it, those areas have scaled down slightly, just since they are, a bit more average. And since, those areas are all over across the city, it doesn't really make sense to keep those as large as they might be in real life. So yeah, this is one area that is definitely scaled up slightly. And that's, again, just to, draw attention to this large palace garden, as it is a really cool location. And something that's been on the top of my list to build for a while, but even so, I never got around to it. And that's really simply just because it has been, it's pretty far outside the heart of Berlin, right? I didn't want to immediately start building out here because, for one, the rivers initially were a little weird, and I didn't fix those until pretty recently. So I really couldn't build this until I fixed the rivers and everything going around there. But once I did that, I definitely wanted to start work on this, since, yeah, again, it's always something I wanted to build, and something that's been frequently requested by quite a lot of you as well. But yeah, so nonetheless, as I said, it is going to be a two-part build, but the second part of the build will not be coming next week. And that is because I have some pretty exciting news, and that is that I am beginning work on the next mini-series. So I'm sure some of you have noticed that my upload schedule has not been as consistent. I've been missing a few weeks here and there for the past couple months, really. And there's several reasons for that, but one is I have been working on the new miniseries. And part of that is actually 2 custom assets that I have been working on myself. 2 assets that are kind of essential, I would say, to what I am building. I, of course, don't want to give too much away. I want to keep it a secret a little longer and before I drop a teaser. But those 2 assets I have shown to my patrons on my Patreon account, and none of them happen to recognize where they are from. So yeah, that's the thing. So I'm not going to show them today on this video because I have a feeling that quite a few of you, or at least a significant number of you, will probably recognize them, and as such will, comment and kind of give away what I am basing this mini-series on. So I'm planning on dropping a teaser to the channel probably sometime next week, hopefully as well with the first episode of the new mini-series. If not a new episode, then at least a little teaser as to what the new series is going to be. So definitely stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to get this miniseries going. In fact, this idea was almost the one that I decided to use for the last miniseries. The last miniseries being the one in which we built Pripyat and Chernobyl as it was back in 1986. If you missed that series, definitely at least check out the cinematic videos. There's a couple of them. Just to see it. I really enjoyed that series, so I'm glad I did that one. And also because, if I had done it back then, I wouldn't have been able to build those 3 custom assets that I'm going to use for this mini-series. So basically it all worked out in the end, of course, so that's great. But I will give you guys one hint, or a couple of hints I should say, as to what this series will be, and that is that it is going to be based on something in Germany, and that it's going to be a map and a city over the course of 3 different time periods. So I won't say what those time periods are, but yeah, 2 hints. In Germany over 3 time periods. Make of that what you will. Again, I know many of you are from Germany, so perhaps you might know what this is, but throw your best guess down in the comments if you think you know what it is. I do have a feeling some of you will probably be able to guess it off of that simple hint. But most of you, I'm sure, will have absolutely no idea. But the rest of you, definitely comment, and we'll see if any of you know what it's going to be. So back to what we were doing here on screen. I did kind of want to touch up on what we did a second ago. While I was talking about the miniseries, and that is the little pond there in the center, kind of a reflecting pond, I suppose you can call it. But that particular little location there gave me quite a little trouble for some reason. Mostly because what I did was I used those grass keys to kind of lower the elevation down a bit right around the pond, since I wanted to be, or I wanted the water level to be like right up against the grass. I didn't want to be there any sort of sharp or steep cliff or anything like that. Which also reminds me, I use a new mod which kind of removes the cliff texture, so it allows you to do a lot of things. Probably most useful is, I'm sure many of you have tried to like put a road right next to another road or something, like say an elevated road right next to one that's several meters below it. Both not bridges or anything like that, but just both ground roads, and you get that kind of nasty shadowy zigzag edge on the top road. Basically the mod removes the cliff texture, and the cliff texture is actually what causes apparently that nasty zigzag edge that you get on the road network or anything similar to that. So yeah, it removes that and allows you to do stuff like that without getting any of that nasty shadow edge. But it also just kind of gets rid of the cliff texture, which sometimes can appear too easily. I mean, for Berlin, of course, the city is quite flat, so I want these water edges to be very green. I don't want any sort of cliff texture. I don't want it to make it look like a drop. So getting rid of that texture definitely makes it look a little more gradual, a little more realistic, I'd say. But yeah, so using the grass key to try to lower the elevation a bit, I of course need a little rock wall there just to add some detail. Kind of makes it pop out, of course, because I don't think in real life there's an actual wall surrounding that pond. If I'm not mistaken, there isn't today. But I added one anyways, just like I said, to kind of distinguish and kind of make it draw attention to that, since it definitely pops out, make it look, I think, a little more nicer. But yeah, it gave me a ton of trouble. And the entire time I was thinking, like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. I feel like was dumb and just could not think of a better way to do that, because I didn't want to use, a normal key, which had a very large, long kind of stone walkway, on top, like every, basic key on the workshop, or the new keys that came out in that recent DLC pack, which is really cool. I did get that one with the bridges and keys. Great DLC pack. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know if there's a better way to have gone about that, because again, I couldn't think of it, but I felt the entire time like there had to be a better way. So yeah, let me know what that way is, because I'm pretty sure it exists, and I just for whatever reason could not think of it, and still can't think of it. But so moving on from that, in addition to the mini-series being some pretty exciting news for the channel, I also want to mention that we have, starting today, a Discord competition going. So this competition is going to be for the best nature reserve. So basically something not super common. I know I haven't seen too many of those built. So it was recommended to me by one of you, and I thought it was a great idea for a competition. And since personally I don't think I've ever built it, and like I said, I haven't seen many people build it either. So whatever, a nature reserve means to you, so whether that could be something like a national park and very large, or maybe something smaller like a wildlife refuge or sanctuary for birds or small animals, or perhaps even something for like research or studies for a university or government, basically go crazy with it. Anything that you can think of, anything you can come up with really for a nature reserve. So whoever comes up with the best nature reserve will of course have their build featured on the video after the competition ends, and then they'll be able to choose the topic or idea for the next build competition. So as of now, the competition is going to run until the first video released in July. So tentatively, I'll say that is July 3rd. Again, tentatively, since, stuff could happen, and working on the miniseries, I'm not entirely sure what the schedule is going to be up until that point. But basically, that'll give you about 3 weeks to work on the build. And, I think that is sufficient time to work on it and get a good build going. But yeah, so you'll be able to submit your builds to the Discord channel in the appropriate channel within the Discord channel. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing all your guys' builds and featuring the winner in one of the videos. Definitely going to be something cool that will probably continue on the channel. So I do want to give a shout out to Rastus for giving me the idea for having a competition like this for the channel, as well as the idea for the actual nature reserve for this particular competition. So yeah, thank you for that. It's definitely something cool for the channel. Hopefully making this channel a little more better than it already is. But yeah, so if any of you are interested in that, definitely check out the link to my Discord channel, which is in the description, and I hope to see a bunch of you participating, and looking forward to seeing all of your entries. And so at some point in the video, I did want to mention briefly some simple history regarding the palace. And so basically, the palace was commissioned in the late 1600s by the wife of Frederick I, Sophia Charlotte. And construction began in 1695, and it was completed not too long later in 1713. Considering, the size of the garden and the palace itself, that seems, like pretty efficient time if you ask me. But yeah, I did want to I found this really cool photo of the garden around this time period when it was built. And you can see even the lot has changed with the actual palace garden itself. Of course, the trees were a lot smaller, so you could see a whole lot more stuff there and see a whole lot more details, which I absolutely love. If I had actually come across this image earlier, I might have used that to, base some of the build off of, since, like I said, you can see a lot more. And it looks, like I said, it's a very cool photo, and definitely shows you, what the architects were thinking when they were constructing the palace and the garden. Since the architect and the architects, I should say, did draw inspiration from Versailles, you can kind of tell that with the garden. Since, of course, Versailles was, I guess, throughout Europe, being the most beautiful, palace and garden in the world, really, at least in the Western world. So you can definitely see some of the inspiration and the similar Baroque architecture with the palace, and just a similar idea with the palace garden. So that's very cool. And also, as I mentioned, the palace was commissioned by Sophia Charlotte, and Charlotte being where the name Charlottenburg comes from. So that is what the town is named after, and of course the palace is named after the town. So yeah, very cool little history there. I didn't know any of that myself, so hopefully you guys learned a little something there as well. But so for the rest of today's video, not too much stuff going on still. At the very end, we do have a quick little PO thing to build a mausoleum, since in addition to being the palace here, there was also a mausoleum in the palace garden, as well as, I believe, a belvedere. Just a fancy little building, which I didn't include in this episode, since I did just put a simple, I forget the asset, but there's I think it's like a European mansion, I think the asset might be called. There's several houses within that pack. I forget who it's by, but I just use that kind of as a placeholder. So like I said, I didn't include it in the video since it didn't really match the building in real life at all. So I'll try and find something better for it, but yeah, we'll see. It's probably not too big of a deal, since it is a pretty small building, fairly far away from the palace itself. But I also initially was going to keep right after this part where I add this little building here, which I'm not entirely sure what it was, but it was a later addition, I believe, to the palace. It wasn't initially constructed along with the rest of the palace and the garden. But back then, in 1929, there were some simple small houses right here along the road where I'm building, and I did include those in the build. I should say I built them, I just didn't include them in the video, just to save a little time, since it wasn't that interesting. But you will see that in the cinematics, I believe. Which, speaking of cinematics, considering I didn't do any detailing, and there didn't really seem too much of a point in showing a bunch of undetailed paths and the water and the palace, since the palace is a wonderful asset, but I didn't really do anything besides plop it down. So there really isn't too much when it comes to cinematics. Just a quick little comparison before and after, and then one last little overhead view, which I'll send you guys out on that particular cinematic. But yeah, so what we're doing here is working on the little fountain area, which sits in the center of the garden. This did not exist back in 1929, since, as I said at the start of the episode, this area here and all these paths here, I based off of how it is in modern day. And reason, like I said, was just because I think it looks better. Back then it looked a little plain, and since it is, like I said, a beautiful garden, I wanted to really make it look as nice as possible. So I did also want to include this little fountain, since a fountain's always nice. Anytime you can add some sort of water feature or something to an area, I think it's always well worth it. So I did that quickly. But yeah, so this is the last part of the episode. And this is the mausoleum. So I didn't have any assets for the mausoleum. I probably could have found something on the workshop, but since I was already in game, I didn't want to have to exit out, go to the workshop, restart the game, since that would have taken a while, and I just kind of wanted to, I was in the mood for playing the game, and, having to exit out and do all that crap kind of, kills my creativity at times. So to avoid that, I just figured I'd make something out of PO. I plopped several buildings down. One you see there on the left and on the right, and several more as well, which I deleted. But just trying to see what was available that I was already subscribed to. And I felt like this building, which is the Neue Wache, I believe. This building is also in Berlin, which I did place several episodes ago, which was actually, I had it initially in another place in the city because I didn't actually know this was a real building in Berlin until someone pointed it out, since it was kind of early in the series when I built it. But basically just shrinking it down with procedural objects and getting rid of some of the pillars and then adding the roof on top like that. It more or less looks like the actual mausoleum that exists here in the garden. Same general shape and structure, has those 4 pillars in the front, and I think it turned out well. So yeah, and that just goes right there, that little kind of egg-shaped loop. But yeah, so that is going to do it for today's episode. As I said, we don't really have any cinematics since there isn't too much to show off. But part 2 of this build will be coming sometime from now, since next week or the week after will be the start of the new miniseries. So as I said, look forward to the teaser on the new miniseries. I'm really excited to get that started. I've been wanting to get that going for a while, and now's a good time to get it going. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video nonetheless, even though it wasn't too much detailing, and I will see you all in the next video.